For 34 years, Jeannie Seely held her place on the Grand Ole Opry stage with quiet consistency, showing up, performing, and letting the music speak for itself. But now, something has changed. After decades of maintaining a measured and composed exterior, she has finally started to open up. What she is revealing goes beyond simple reflection. It is truth forged by time, loyalty, and everything she has witnessed behind those curtains. This is not merely another Opry story. It is a moment that feels long overdue. What kept her silent for so many years? And why has she chosen this moment to finally speak? Let us explore every detail. Driving away in an MGA Roadster, Jeannie Seely chased a dream and carved her own lane in country music through quiet defiance and a style that never fit neatly into expectations. Long before the Opry lights became familiar, she had already found ways to command attention. Songs like Don't Touch Me did not just perform well, they stayed with listeners. That track rose to number 2 on the Billboard Country Chart and earned her a Grammy in 1967. More than that, it introduced a voice that felt both steady and unafraid to stand apart. That voice did not start on a stage, however. It began far from Nashville in Titusville, Pennsylvania, where Marilyn Jean Seely was born on July 6, 1940, and raised on a farm near Townville. Music was not a distant or formal thing there. It lived inside the house. Her father worked long hours at a steel mill and spent weekends playing banjo at square dances, while her mother filled quiet moments with song. Family and friends often gathered around, picking instruments and passing melodies back and forth, creating something that felt less like performance and more like a habit. In the middle of it all, a young girl listened closely, absorbing everything without realizing how far it would carry her. That connection deepened early. By age 11, she was stepping into local radio at WMGW in Meadville, and soon after onto a television set in Erie. It looked like momentum, but it did not come without friction. At Townville High School, she balanced being an honor student and a cheerleader with something harder to carry: standing out. Singing country music and coming from a modest background made her a target for teasing, a quiet pressure that never fully left, but never pushed her off course either. After graduating in 1958, life took a more practical turn. She worked at the Titusville Trust Company, first as a stenographer and then as a secretary, taking night classes at the American Banking Institute, building something stable. Yet even then, there was a sense that this was not the full picture. Then came a moment that felt almost accidental but changed everything. An Easter storm, a car stuck deep in the snow, and a realization that staying where she was might mean staying still. Not long after, she made a bold and uncertain decision, heading for California in her MGA Roadster, chasing warmer weather and something she could not yet name. California did not immediately open doors. She took another bank job in Beverly Hills, steady but unfulfilling, and soon that quiet pull toward music returned. Stronger this time, she left the bank and accepted a secretarial role at Imperial Records. Though it paid less, comfort was no longer the goal. Proximity was. She needed to be close to where things were happening. Around the same time, she found her way onto a local television program called Hollywood Jamboree, slowly placing herself inside the world she wanted to join. That shift changed everything. While working at Imperial, she began writing songs, first for 4-Star Records and then beyond. One of her earliest compositions, Anyone Who Knows What Love Is Will Understand, started simply with just her and a piano, before she tracked down a then-unknown Randy Newman to help finish it. When Irma Thomas recorded it in 1964, it broke into the pop charts, quietly marking Seely as someone whose words could travel far beyond her own voice. From there, momentum built steadily rather than suddenly. She co-wrote Senses with Glenn Campbell, which Connie Smith recorded. Then came songs picked up by Dottie West and Norma Jean. Each one placed her name a little deeper into Nashville's songwriting scene, even before she officially arrived. Recording soon followed. After signing with Challenge Records, she headed into RCA's Studio B in Nashville in 1964, cutting early singles like If I Can't Have You, A World Without You, and Today Is Not the Day. They did not explode overnight, but they did something just as important. They introduced her to the people and places that would shape what came next. Somewhere along that path, she crossed paths with Hank Cochran. It was not just a meeting, it was a turning point. He saw something in her voice worth pushing further and encouraged her to leave California behind for Nashville. Dottie West echoed that advice, reinforcing a direction that was starting to feel inevitable. So in 1965, she made the move, and almost immediately things began to shift. At a DJ convention in Nashville, she reconnected with Cochran, and this time the conversation came with terms. He would help guide her career, but only if he had control over the decisions. That condition could have gone either way, but for Seely, it opened a door she had been moving toward for years. Not long after, another opportunity followed. She stepped in as Norma Jean's replacement on the Porter Wagoner Show, placing herself directly in front of a national audience. Just like that, the quiet, steady climb from a Pennsylvania farm was no longer quiet at all. What came next did not feel like a breakthrough at first. In fact, it looked like repeated rejection. When Hank Cochran carried a demo of Jeannie Seely's voice around Nashville, every major label passed. No hesitation, no second chances, just a quiet series of no's that could have easily stopped things before they began. But one door did not close completely. Fred Foster at Monument Records showed interest, though it came with a condition. If Seely could find the right song, something strong enough to cut through the noise, then maybe there was a place for her. That maybe turned into something real at a road stop in Rochester, New York. While traveling with Porter Wagoner's show, Seely got a call from Cochran. Over the phone, he sang the opening lines of a song he had been working on. It was rough and unfinished, but something in it made her pause. She agreed to hear the rest. Not long after, he was on a plane, meeting her in person, finishing what he started. Somewhere between those verses, the decision was made. When she stepped into Monument's Nashville office and recorded Don't Touch Me, everything changed. The song climbed near the top of the country charts, crossed into the pop charts, and slowly took on a life of its own. Over time, writers and historians would call it a standard. But in that moment, it was something simpler and more powerful. Proof that the voice so many had passed on could not only hold its own, but also stand out. That success came with changes. On the Porter Wagoner Show, Seely's place did not stay hers for long. She was replaced by Dolly Parton, a shift that could have felt like a setback. But by then, she did not need that space the same way anymore. The song had already opened bigger doors. In 1967, she stepped into one of them, becoming a member of the Grand Ole Opry. It was not just a milestone. It was an arrival that tied her back to those early radio nights, listening as a child long before she ever imagined standing on that stage. From there, the pace did not slow. Her debut album pushed into the top tier of country releases, and her follow-up work kept her firmly in the conversation. Behind much of it was Cochran, not just as a collaborator, but now as her husband. Their connection shaped the sound and direction of her music during those years, giving it a consistency that felt both personal and deliberate. By the late 1960s, her life was in constant motion. Touring stretched from coast to coast, one stage blending into the next. Alongside it all, another partnership began to form. Through her connection with Ernest Tubb, she started working closely with Jack Green. What started as a collaboration quickly grew into something bigger. Their duet, Wish I Didn't Have to Miss You, became a major hit, pulling them into the spotlight as a pair. Together, they built a touring act that carried them across North America and into Europe, playing major venues and drawing crowds that came as much for the chemistry as the music itself. At the same time, Seely's solo work continued on a parallel track. Not every release climbed high, but the consistency never broke. When she returned to a more stripped-back sound with Can I Sleep in Your Arms, something clicked again. The song reached the top tier of the charts, reconnecting her with earlier success, but now with a deeper, more seasoned edge. That balance between collaboration and independence defined much of the early 1970s. She moved between labels, working with producers like Owen Bradley, experimenting with sound while staying rooted in the emotional weight that had always defined her voice. There were overseas tours, including performances for U.S. troops across Eastern Asia, and even a stretch where she hosted a radio segment for the American Armed Forces Network, reaching millions of listeners. It was no longer just about performing, it was about presence, about being heard in different ways and different places. Still, momentum carried forward with new partnerships, new recordings, and new stages. Even as the industry shifted around her, Seely stayed in motion, adapting without losing her core. By the late 1970s, the pace had begun to change, but the work had not stopped. She continued recording, writing, and showing up. Other artists began picking up her songs, adding their voices to words she had shaped years earlier. It was a quiet kind of influence that did not always make headlines, but carried weight all the same. Then in 1977, something unexpected broke that rhythm. A car accident, sudden and disruptive, forced a pause. For someone who had spent years moving forward without stopping, even that pause became part of the story. While the world held onto Jeannie Seely as a voice and a constant presence on the Opry stage, another story ran quietly alongside it. This one did not unfold under bright lights or applause, but in private moments, long stretches of loyalty, and relationships that shaped her just as much as the music did. Behind the record-setting 5,397 Opry appearances was a personal life that carried its own weight. At the center were two marriages, both deeply felt, both very different, and both leaving lasting marks. The first began not with romance, but with music. When Hank Cochran entered her life, it was through work, through songs, through a creative connection that built slowly before becoming something else. He was not just writing for her. He was shaping her sound, pushing her towards something bolder and less predictable. Somewhere in that process, the line between collaboration and connection blurred. By 1969, they made it official, marrying in Renfro Valley, Kentucky. But even that beginning carried complexity. Cochran had already been married 3 times. By the time he stood beside Seely, she was stepping into a life that already had history and layers. Still, what they built together felt strong, at least for a time. Their years together were filled with music that did not just succeed, but lasted, carrying emotion, edge, and honesty that felt lived in rather than performed. Cochran helped shape the very sound that would define her, writing records that carried her voice into new places. During those years, her collaborations with Jack Green became a major part of her career, with Cochran's influence woven through many of those recordings. Together, they created music that felt connected, as if every piece was part of the same larger story. By the time Jeannie Seely spoke about the Grand Ole Opry in her final years, there was a weight to her words that had not always been there before. Not because her love for it had changed, but because time had. After decades on that stage, after 5,397 performances, more than any other artist in its history, she was not just reflecting anymore. She was thinking about what would remain when she was no longer there. Now, with her passing at 85, those words feel like something she was leaving behind. From the very beginning, Seely's relationship with the Opry was never quiet or passive. When she first arrived in 1966, she stepped into an institution still holding tightly to tradition, especially regarding women. Expectations were unspoken but firm. Long skirts, safe presentation, an image not meant to be questioned. She questioned it anyway. She walked in wearing a miniskirt, slipped off her coat, and stepped onto that stage before anyone could stop her. It was not planned as a statement, but it became one. When Opry manager Ott Devine confronted her afterward, she did not back down. She explained that she had just come from California, that this was what people were wearing, and that change was already coming whether they liked it or not. She even joked about it, offering a compromise that made the point clear. The future was not something you could keep outside the door. That moment changed things. Other women began to follow her lead, slowly stepping out of rigid expectations. For Seely, that was always the point, not rebellion for its own sake, but movement, progress, a refusal to let things stay stuck simply because they always had been. That same energy carried into how she spoke about opportunity inside the Opry. For years, women were expected to sing and step aside, while men hosted and carried the flow of the show. It was treated as fixed tradition. But Seely did not see it that way. She kept raising the issue again and again, even when dismissed. She argued that it was not just about fairness for women, but about the quality of the show itself. With a roster including many female artists, she believed the Opry was ignoring a major part of its own talent, and, just as importantly, a major part of its audience. To her, it made no sense that women could fill seats, but not hold the microphone. In 1985, she became the first woman to host an Opry segment, though even that came by chance, stepping in when a male host was stranded in a snowstorm. Still, she took that moment and used it as proof that it could be done. She did not stop there, but kept pushing until real change finally took hold years later. Beyond the battles and progress, something else defined her time there: the people. Seely often spoke of her Opry sisters, a circle of women who shared that space through the years: Connie Smith, Jean Shepard, Jan Howard, Tammy Wynette, and especially Dottie West. With them, the Opry became more than a stage. It became a shared life. One of the hardest moments came in 1991, when she was already backstage at the Opry and heard that Dottie West had been in a devastating car accident on her way there. Shock moved quickly through everyone. For days, there was hope, then loss. Seely stayed close through it all, keeping vigil at the hospital. When the Opry asked her to host the show in tribute just days after West's passing, she did not think she could do it. But after days of feeling helpless, she realized this was something she could do, something that mattered. So she stepped forward. That was who she was inside the Opry, someone who carried it even when it was heavy. By her later years, that role had changed again. She became a guide, a steady presence for newer members. In 2022, when Lauren Elena joined the Opry, Seely did not just welcome her. She pulled her aside and made her promise to keep pushing, to keep challenging, to carry forward the same fight she had spent decades holding on to. It was not said lightly, but like something that needed to continue after she was gone. Even then, she made it clear she was not ready to leave. She spoke about how much she still loved being there, how she was enjoying it more than ever, and how determined she was to help guide it into the future. Underneath that was something deeper. She admitted she could not imagine anything worse than the Opry losing its way in her era. To her, it was too important, too unique, something country music could not afford to let fade. The clearest picture of how she saw it came in something simple. She often said that somewhere out there was always a little girl listening, just like she once had, dreaming of standing on that stage. Now with Jeannie Seely gone, that belief feels like more than just a thought. It feels like a reminder. What Jeannie Seely song was your favorite? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.